The Elder Scrolls 6 is still pretty far off, and while a lot of people have already speculated where this game will take place, I figure I might as well throw my video onto the oversized pile. For the most part, this is simply because when they do announce it and I am correct, I can be like, haha, see, I was right, and here's my proof. However, I'm not going to tell you where I think it should be set and why that would be so super cool like most of these videos do. No, I am going to predict the most likely place it will be based in. So the first thing we should do is take a look at what regions have not been seen in an Elder Scrolls video game, since it's extremely unlikely that Bethesda will return to a province we have already seen. And these regions being Summerset Isles, Elsweyr, Valenwood, and the Black Marsh. We also only partially saw Hammerfell in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, so that kinda counts, I guess. Another place I often hear mentioned for some reason is Akavir, which is a separate continent from Tamriel entirely, and while it would certainly be interesting to see Akavir in a video game, I think this is the least likely of any option. It might be possible that we see Akavir in the future through Elder Scrolls Online, or perhaps through DLC for a future TES entry, but Bethesda will likely wish to visit all of the provinces before choosing to branch out to new environments. The next least likely place I think will be set in is the Black Marsh. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there who really want to visit these dangerous marshlands, but I believe the primary factor for Black Marsh being out is due to its overcomplicated and alien nature. A large majority of Elder Scrolls fans were introduced to the game during Skyrim and Oblivion, and while there's some pretty fantastical stuff in these games, they're still pretty grounded in classic fantasy and are centered around human environments. And the bigwigs at Bethesda are likely going to be concerned about shifting an audience from a Nordic mythos to one where the gods are trees that could probably destroy everything in existence if they really wanted to. Valenwood is also off this list for pretty similar reasons, and while I think that there is still some likelihood of TES 6 taking place there, and I would love to see it, I think it is less likely than these next ones. So out of all the places listed, which province would be the most likely? Well, I believe it to be either Summerset Isles, Elsweyr, or potentially Hammerfell. Hammerfell has potential simply due to all the events that are being mentioned during the game of Skyrim. However, I think this is not likely due to the fact that Hammerfell was somewhat explored in Daggerfall, even if it was quite some time ago. Additionally, it would mean a return to another human region after over a decade of human regions, and I think they'll want to mix it up, or at least I really hope they'll want to mix it up. Now this leaves us with only two options, Elsweyr and the Summerset Isles, and trying to decide between these two is no easy task, but I am gonna do it. Elsweyr would be a very interesting place to adventure, and it could allow for some introduction to the neighboring worlds of Black Marsh and Valenwood at the same time. Additionally, Elsweyr's environments would be unique enough to feel fresh, but not so completely different from the previous two games. Whereas Valenwood and Black Marsh are pretty freaking unique from Skyrim or Cyrodiil. However, despite this, I think there is one more place that just barely makes slightly more sense. And that is, of course, the Summerset Isles. Now, the reason why I'm not definitively saying that the Summerset Isles is the most likely place to set TES 6 is because of the mystery of the Summerset Isles. And if Bethesda didn't want to spoil that mystery, then the obvious choice would be to not go there. However, I think the next obvious choice would be to cash in on that mystery and make just billions and billions of dollars. Now, over the games of Oblivion and especially Skyrim, Bethesda has been building up a lot of interest in this strange and unvisited province. In Skyrim, there was a whole plotline that involved a member of the Psijic Order, which of course resides in these isles. Now to me, this feels like Bethesda is trying to build up interest for what could be an important plotline for the next Elder Scrolls game, or simply interest in what's going on in the Summerset Isles in general. Another key detail I want to focus on here, and may help back up my theory on Summerset Isles being the next game, is how Bethesda likes to focus on their game engine. Now with each Elder Scrolls release, it is clear that they update and change just about everything, generally for the better. However, there is always one aspect that they focus on much more than on other areas. In Morrowind, it was exploration, in Oblivion, it was questing, and in Skyrim, it was combat. Along with that, there is always something that gets neglected more than others. For Skyrim, that area seemed to me that the most neglected area was the magic system. In Oblivion and Morrowind, the magic system was very extensive. There was a lot of different spells that made for a lot of different things to do, and most of all, you could create your own spells if you really wished to. Along with that, enchanting items was also much more important. In Skyrim, you could give yourself a buff or do some extra damage, but in Oblivion, you could give your arrows an enchantment and your bow an enchantment, and then cause unbelievable amounts of damage and cause a massive explosion or do some other really cool thing. Now, the magic system certainly had some nice improvements, but that was mostly due to the way they upgraded the combat system overall. In the long run, magic just felt more boring. Additionally, the magic system was no longer meant to exist alongside combat. It was now directly a part of it. If The Elder Scrolls 6 was set in Summerset Isles, it could give reason to overhaul the magic system completely. They don't necessarily have to return to the style of system used in Oblivion, but it would be interesting to see it much more robust and fleshed out, especially since we are going to lose the ability of dragon shouts in the next game. Now, the last point I want to focus on doesn't necessarily signal Summerset Isles as our next destination, but it is a pretty important factor to think about. And that, of course, is the Thalmor. At first, I thought this would be a point against Summerset Isles being an option. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it is likely the other way around. If Bethesda wished to make the Thalmor a more important plotline in the next game, the only real option they could take, aside from absurdly setting the game in Cyrodiil, would be to set it in the Thalmor heartland, the Summerset Isles. In this case, the Thalmor would act likely as the primary antagonists of the game. This would give reason for the Summerset Isles being an important focus of the storyline, as the Empire, now having regained its strength after the events of Skyrim, and with a new Emperor, would take the fight directly to the Thalmor to end the threat once and for all. If TES 6 were set in Elsweyr, then the Thalmor would at best be only a side quest, likely even less important than they were in Skyrim. It is even possible that Bethesda would write them out entirely, claiming that the Thalmor were defeated years prior. Also, you would start the game as a prisoner of the Thalmor. I mean, that's not important, but I like to think about what kind of crazy prison shenanigans we'll be up to this time. Now, of course, Bethesda could just be testing what people are most drawn to in the Elder Scrolls and deciding where to set TES 6 based on that. And if that is to be believed, then Black Marsh could be a likely candidate. However, still, I think Bethesda would then decide to set it in Elsweyr so as to not make TES 6 feel too different from previous iterations, as well as allow new players an introduction to Black Marsh in general. Okay, so I've said my bit here, so I hope you hit the subscribe button, and if you want to tell me I'm a big idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about, then just write it in the comments. Also, feel free to check out my other stuff. It's not very good, but it can't hurt you. Like this video about my top 5 Oblivion quests. It actually wasn't too bad. I will see you guys next week.